Lesson 8.3, Solving Percent Problems. We'll do a few examples in this video of using our understanding of mathematical language to write an equation, and once we have an equation written, we're going to use our knowledge of inverse operations to solve for the unknown or the missing variable. Number one, it says 15 is what percent of 60? Okay, so I'll start with 15, I'll write that down. Is, I know, means equals in mathematical language, so 15 equals what percent? That's my unknown. And because this is an unknown, I can use a variable. Okay, let's use P for percent. So 15 equals, or 15 is what percent? I don't know, so I'm using a variable P. Then I have of. What does of mean in math? Of means times, right? So I'm going to use a little dot. For multiplication, you could also use parentheses. 15 is what percent P of, that's times 60. So P times 60. Okay? Now, I need to get P by itself. I need to have P equals something. So how would I undo this multiplication? Well, what is the opposite of multiplication? The inverse of multiplication. That would be division, right? And so I would need to divide this side by 60, that number right there, divide this side by 60. And the golden rule for equations is that whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you must also do the same thing to the other side of the equal sign. So I divide the right side by 60 and the left side by 60. When I do that, these 60s simplify to 1, right? Because 60 over 60, or 60 divided by 60, that's 1. And so I'm left with P, which is what I want. P is equal to 15 over 60. Now remember, this horizontal fraction bar, what operation is that? That is division, right? So I could say top number divided by bottom number, or 15 divided by 60. If you put that into your calculator, you will get 0.25. 0.25. But this is decimal, right? This is a decimal, and I want to know what percent. 15 is what percent of 60. And so my last step here would be to take this decimal to a percentage, either by multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal 2 places to the right, which is the same thing as multiplying by 100. So 0.25 times 100, that would be 25, and I can use my percent symbol. So 25%. 15 is 25% of 60. Number two, it says 75% of what number is 90? Okay, whenever I write an equation, I put a percentage into an equation, I got to change that percentage to a decimal by dividing by 100 or moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So 75% in decimal form would be 0.75. So I have 0.75, or 75% of, that's times. So I'm multiplying this by something. I'm multiplying this by 75% of what number? So that's my unknown. I don't know what number. And so let's just use an X for a variable for the unknown number. I'm taking 75% of that number, or times that number. Then I see the word is, that's equals, so I'm going to write an equal sign. Then I have 90, I'll write 90 down. So there's my equation. Now, like we have been doing when we cross multiplied and divided, I divide by the number in front of the letter, or the number being multiplied by the letter, by the variable. In this case, that's 0.75. I'm multiplying that by the unknown number. And so to get this variable x by itself, I have to undo this multiplication. And I undo multiplication by division. And I use the horizontal fraction bar to show division. So I'm dividing this side by 0.75. And if I divide the left side by this number, I divide the right side of the equation by that same number. You always do the same thing to both sides of the equation. When I divide by 0.75, these 0.75 simplify to 1, because 0.75 divided by 0.75, that's 1 times x, or just x. And so x, my unknown number, is equal to 90 divided by 0.75. You put that into your calculator and you would get 120. The unknown number is 120. So 75% of 120 would be 90. Number three, what percent of 56 is 7? So first it says what percent, that's my unknown. I don't know what percent, and so I'm going to use P for percent. What percent of, that's times, so I'm going to use a dot for multiplication. What percent of 56, so P times 56. What percent of 56? There's is. What does is mean? Is means equals in math. Is 7, so equals 7. P times 56 equals 7. That is my equation. Now I got to solve for P. I got to get P by itself. I want P to equal something. And so how am I going to undo this multiplication? P times 56? Well, the inverse of multiplication would be division. So I divide this side by 56 and this side by 56. You always do the same thing to both sides of the equation. These 56 simplify because 56 over 56, that's 1 times P, or just P. So P is equal to 7 over 56, or 7 divided by 56. If you put this into your calculator, you'll get 0.125, which is a decimal, right? But I want to know what percent of 56 is 7. And so the final step will be to take this decimal to a percentage by multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal 2 places to the right, which are the same thing. And so what percent would this be? This would be 12.5%. 12.5%. 12.5% of 56 is 7. Last example here. 25% of 360 is what number? Okay, so let's write our equation. 25%, how do you write that into decimal form? Well, you divide by 100 or move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 25% is 0.25 in decimal form. Of, that means times 360. So I'm taking 25% of 360 or times 360. All right, you can use a dot or parentheses to show multiplication. So I have 25% of or times 360. There's your equal sign. Is what number? I don't know what number, so I'm going to use the variable x. And so all I do here is 0.25 times 360, and I would get 90 in my calculator. So 25% of 360 would be 90.